I'm John Nikas, and I'm an automotive writer and historian, and I'm going to talk to you today about the process we use to write Lord Almighty, the evolution and ownership of the Lord Howe Mercedes-Benz Type S. In talking about the history of this car, you really have to look at the history of Earl Howe. And for those of you that don't know who he is, he's probably the most important figure in British motoring, certainly between the wars and probably in total history. The Howe family is incredibly important to the history of England. His ancestors include both the General Howe and Admiral Howe, who commanded the British forces during the American Revolution, which is pretty fascinating. And eventually you get to the fifth Earl Howe, who is Lord Curzon before his father passes away, and he becomes really an important figure in how motor racing and motorsports develop in the United Kingdom. And in 1928, ordered this car from Mercedes-Benz, and peculiarly, whereas most Mercedes were bodied in Germany, this vehicle was bodied in the UK at a place called Barker's, which really was known for doing bodies for Rolls-Royce. In telling the story of this car, we really had to go back and try to figure out the story of Lord Howe himself, which was difficult because even though he was a very well-known individual, it turns out a lot of the stuff that's been written about him is either somewhat inaccurate or wholly inaccurate. And so we had to go to primary sources to try to figure out his competition record, the cars he drove in competition. And when it came to the ownership history of this car, there were a number of areas that were unclear. And so I think for anyone, the writing is one part of the process, but the detective work is really the other half of the process. For this particular book, the subject vehicle was named Best of Show at Pebble Beach. And for anyone that really doesn't know, Pebble Beach is not just the top of the pyramid, but it is the one award that everybody wants to win. There are a number of factors we weigh, which would be aesthetic excellence, technical innovation, rarity, competition prowess, maybe a distinguished ownership history. And most cars will tick a few of those boxes. Never in my experience of 30 years has a single car ticked all of those boxes. And in this case, this Mercedes-Benz does that because, the Type S Mercedes was the supercar of its day, and it wasn't even the supercar of its day. It was far more advanced than even that. It had a Porsche design chassis. It had a supercharged engine which gave it performance that really made it a formidable competitor in competition. It had an incredible presence. It was a very attractive car. And then you throw in Lord Howe's ownership. And of course, in his ownership, that is tied into a competition history that's second to none, certainly in the United Kingdom, and one of the most important ones in the world. So this car really does all of that. It combines all those things. And there's a lot of pressure throughout the process because we wanted to do justice to the car. We certainly wanted to do justice to this chain of ownership, which really encompasses some of the biggest names in the hobby. And we wanted to be able to tell that story completely, but we wanted to tell it accurately, to do the best job that we could to complement the photographs that Michael took that really show this car in the best light.